Доброго дня, мене звати Борис, я з міста Маріуполь. Звуки війни. Я хочу вам розповісти, як звучить літак і бомба, яка влучує в кислородний цех комбіната Ілліча. І під ногами хитається земля. І нема кислородного цеха на комбінаті Ілліча. Звуки війни. Повторюйте за мною. Повторюйте за мною, щоб ви запам'ятали. Літак, полутонна бомба чи тонна. Це є звуки війни.
Thank you for joining us today, Anton and Marta. I'm going to start with you, Anton. You explained that the only way to distinguish between the type of a weapon in a war zone is by the sound of the weapon, and that this is fundamental to your work in the Biennale. Repeat after me. So could you tell us more about that connection? How did the process for Repeat After Me start?
I think we can go back to 2022, but even to January of 2022, like when months before the invasion, in 22, before the Russian invasion, Ukrainian government issued this PDF file, like basically online instruction, online manual for people, for Ukrainians, for citizens, what they should do in case they will find themselves in some military war zone situation. The whole manual was giving few different suggestions, or it was describing few different algorithms that the person should take, algorithms of actions that the person should take in case they will find themselves next to this type of weapon or next to this. For example, if they find themselves next to the air just regular fire strike weapon AK-47, then they just have to stay at home and it's enough for them just to stay in their apartments. If they will find themselves next to the mortar shelling, they need to go to they need to at least go to the basement. If they find themselves next to the cruise missiles, they probably have 15 minutes to go to the some shelter, which will be somewhere in their neighborhood. So everything, the way how you can save yourself will really depends on your ability to identify the weapon which is used next to you, or the weapon you can clearly hear. And then the manual was basically saying, and the only really definite way how to recognize what weapon is used next to you is just by the sound. So in the end, this manual was telling to citizens who never actually heard the sound of mortar shelling, or the sound of artillery, or the sound of MRLS. They were telling them, listen, you need to learn it. You need to hear first, and then you have to kind of learn how to recognize and differentiate those sounds, which will become crucial for your survival.
Мене звати Галина. Я приїхала з Запорізької області, города Полог, у 23-му році. Вертольот. Бум-бум-бум-бум-бум. Бум-бум-бум. Дуже рвались бомби. Бум-бум-бум-бум. boom, 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 boom. Повторюйте за нами. Boom, 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 boom. Boo, 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 boo. Boo, 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 boo. Boo, 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 boo. Boo, 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 boo. Boo, boo. Boo, 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 boo. Boo, 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 boo. Ой. Повторюйте за нами. Boom, 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 boom. Boom, 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 boom.
Over to you, Marta. What was your curatorial vision for the Polish Pavilion?
I'm really fascinated with Ukrainian art for already several years. And also in the times that we were in Poland at the time when I was applying to the Polish Pavilion in this situation of war of our neighbors just next to the border. I just compiled the situations, and I thought that if I ever want to show something in the biennale, it would be some really important message that we have to the world, because the times that we are living now don't give us this comfort to just be an observer of beautiful art and paintings. So I proposed, when I saw the first part of the video, Repeat After Me, that was made in 2022, and it was made in a refugee camp for internal refugees in Lviv. It was so powerful, and I thought that this is this kind of message that should be shown in Venice. So my idea was to propose to the open group the production of the second film that will be made in 2024, and it will be shown together with the video from 2022, but with slight change. And this slight change was kind of important because it was showing the time that in 2024 we still have this war in Ukraine, and also the spread of this refugee geography, that these civilian refugees are not only in Ukraine, and they are not only in Poland, because we had like few million people going through Poland, but then later they spread into the whole Europe. Some of them stayed in Poland, but some of they didn't. And yes, this was the idea to make a kind of anti-war manifesto, and also just like a practice of open group is a constant participation with with the public, also involving other people. So in this time, when I invited open group to give them the voice and to give them the space in the Polish Pavilion, in the same time, open group gave this voice to civilian refugees that were um, representing all the refugees, not only from Ukraine somehow, but telling the story of the war from very personal way and using this topic of a sound.
Град М21. Повторюйте зі мною. Повторюйте зі мною.
I wanted to talk about these two versions. You worked first in refugee camps within Ukraine, and later in several places across Europe where people had moved over the course of the war. And of course, I also wanted to speak to you, Marta, about audience reception. But before that, I wanted to ask Anton, how have the people you've made the work with, the people in the video, understood and interpreted the work? What does it mean for them to remember the sounds of war?
Well, it was different. Like the first one that we made in 2022, for people, it was for those Ukrainian refugees who just moved from Eastern Ukraine to Lviv. For them, it was kind of like a direct way to help somehow, or like, because at that point, it was like a summer of 2022. Nobody knew like for how long it's gonna last and everything. So people were like, yeah, sure, like let's raise the awareness, let's spread this this knowledge, like what's happening here, what kind of weapons are used by Russians. And definitely people were like more just they were more interested in a way, like just to help, because and like help in any way, like in Ukrainian cause, because they were like they just left their like houses, and they just wanted to help any way they could. And so for them it was like it was very natural just to share what they just experienced. For the second part, it was basically 2 years after the invasion, and those people at that point, they already like went through many things, went through definitely like immigration, then like being a refugee, right, being like for 2 years just like being in a different country, like in refugee status, without any like idea when they will be able to come back, and also like with not such a great optimism anymore about the situation, right? Because it's like 2 years at that point of the war, and Russia was like still progressing. Russia was still occupying more territories. So people, for them, it was not anymore so much about the like, yeah, let's change the situation. Let's raise the awareness. No, at that point for them, it was more like just the really deep like desire to share their experience, and like for somebody just to listen and to hear them. So I think that was like the predominant like intention for them. And then there's always like with all together, it's like, yeah, sure, you want to do this for Ukraine, you want to, again, like you want to show it like somewhere at Venice Biennale, of course, let's do it. Obviously, we contacted a lot of people, and not so many, like not all of them were like into the idea, you know, because then you have the third element. It's always a traumatic experience, right? To try to remember those sounds, those situations. So not so many, like, I would say predominant part, the people we contacted, the majority, they basically refused in one or another, because of one or the other reason, they refused our like offer to participate. And then like we ended up with this like 21 person who agreed to go with us through this like traumatic experience, but also like through pretty long hours of shooting, which are very thankful and grateful for those. And but yeah, it's like there was like many elements in the second part, like working with those people who were already like into like for 2 years in this another refugee status outside of Ukraine. So yeah, the experience was different very much.
As you were saying, just the idea that someone is listening to you, someone is hearing you, and I wanted to come to the way the work is shown at the Biennale, where in many of the pictures you see this empty row of microphones, and the video is going on. It's inviting you to try out this karaoke version of the sounds. But I wanted to ask you, Marta, or maybe both of you, do people come up to the microphone to try out the version, to try out the sounds?
Well, our goal of this work was not actually to invite people, like to have as many participants of the karaoke. So the main point of the work is that they can choose. They can make this decision if they want to really repeat the sounds of the war, because it looks like an invitation to an entertainment because of this karaoke form, but still they have to repeat the sounds of the war. So it's not that easy to do it. And many people don't decide. What was actually quite obvious for us, that this work is not about for the public to participate like 100% to participate in the karaoke, that also this participation can be when they decide not to participate in the karaoke, but to just watch the film in the military karaoke bar of the future that we had arranged in the pavilion, right? And to just stand face to face with our protagonists of the film. So, well, there are people who are participating in the karaoke, and some of them are saying that this is kind of instruction they get, and maybe they should really learn, and they try through the karaoke to learn these sounds. But some of them just want to, because the protagonists are sharing also the experience, so they want to feel somehow what they felt, or what do they feel. And this is also not very easy. So the public that is involved in the karaoke, it's quite hard for them. And they were always leaving the pavilion with kind of sad and sad faces.
I would just add my because obviously we spend a lot of time at the pavilion. We talk to the people who are like coming out, who just experience the whole piece, and then so we heard like basically two main opinions of like both from the very, let's say, professional people and like I would say people from art, and one were like saying, what's wrong with all those people who are like trying to repeat the sounds of the war? Like why, like what's wrong? Why would you even try to repeat those sounds? Why would you even like try to sing that karaoke, you know? why do you want to bring those sounds of the war to Venice or like anywhere back? And then on the other side, I remember this like French artist like came and they were like, why people are not repeating the sounds? Why people are not singing karaoke? It's so like unrespectful for those like refugees who are like really trying to share this knowledge, to really trying to convey like those like sounds and everything they learned, and people are not even trying. So why people are not singing? Because they also felt like this, like your pure intention, like to try to sing, to repeat, would be like very important, like link, like to like it would be like a very like uh where that's the way how you can really link to them, you know, being there in Venice and they're like scattered all over the world, and just like for you to try to repeat after that, it's that's the only way you can link to them, you can link to their experience, and you have to try it. So there was like two, let's say, two opposing opinions of like why people are not repeating and like why people are repeating. So, and that's just like from the, yeah, like that's just from the audience we learned that.
Yeah, and kind of both of them were right, because this work doesn't give you any like one question, and doesn't give you one answer, you know, this is straight. It's just the 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 work that makes you think about a lot of things, which main goal was our anti-war manifesto, right?
А 16 березня я з родиною і сусідами прийшли в театр в Маріуполі, бо це було місце сховку, люди там збиралися. Ми заселилися, і я вийшла провідати свого дядька, який жив на сусідній вулиці. І коли поверталася назад, я почула звук літака, злякалася, почула, що він десь скинув бомби. І коли підійшла до театру, побачила, що він зруйнований, що дуже багато людей постраждали. Я в істериці бігала навколо театру, розуміючи, що там всередині знаходиться моя родина. Але їм дуже пощастило, вони були в тій частині театру, яка найменше постраждала від удару. І ми знайшлися і втікли від театру якомога подалі. Авіабомбардування. Повторюйте за мною. Повторюйте за мною.
So if you participate and even if you don't, you risk being complicit in what is happening in a way, and that's an interesting contradiction to create in the work. I wanted to ask you, Anton, because you've been at the Venice Biennale on multiple occasions. You've been part of group exhibitions. You've been curators for the 2019 Pavilion. So what does coming back to the Biennale? It has the structure of national pavilions, and each country is representing something in some ways. What does that mean to you at this time, given the kind of situation we're seeing in Europe?
I think this year was kind of paradoxical in a way, in my just changing my own opinion a little, because yeah, of course we all have those questions like, why do we need national pavilions? Is it somehow even reflects like the contemporary or like the present state of the world? Like, yeah, well, with all this like globalization trends and everything, why do we still have to keep to those like national walls of like art, very like local artistic scenes? Why do we need to do that? And but then that's okay. And then like basically the political element, which became very prominent and like very big recently in contemporary art, the political element of all Biennale made me think that there is some meaning in this. There is like some sense. Maybe I would explain it in this way. For example, you know about the main program, right? Which was created by Pedrosa, the Brazilian curator, and his main he came up with the name Foreigners Everywhere, right? Which actually Marta was also inspired by this title, but by this proposal, and maybe that's also like one of the reasons why we are Ukrainians in Polish Pavilion, right? But like in the same time, his program was like 300 artists with the name Foreigners Everywhere. In the same time, ignores like 6 million Ukrainian refugees in Europe, right? It doesn't have like the program doesn't have any Ukrainian artists in it, which in the same time being happening in Italy, like few hundred kilometers from the war zone, from the from the country which like basically like fighting for its existence, with the length of the front line which you can compare to the Second World War II, and in the same time the main program doesn't even mention nothing about it. It doesn't have any one Ukrainian artist, which be like, of course I agree with his with the main agenda of his like show, that he wants to show the not Western canon, right? He wants to introduce South American, African art canon to the Western public. The whole show looks very like museum show, which sometimes a little indigestible, but overall it's very big. You can really learn a lot, but in the same time, sometimes it feels out of touch with the really like present situation of the world and like world affairs, and especially with like, as going back to this to the idea that like was having this like refugee crisis of like people really like fleeing the real war. There is no even mention about that, and like in the main program. So, and then only because of the Polish pavilion, only because of the national pavilions, Venice still had some basically mention of the war, of the Russian-Ukrainian war, only because of Polish pavilion, because of Ukrainian pavilion, which is not in Giardini. Let's also like let's be kind of let's understand the geography of the biennial itself, right? Just because Polish pavilion is in Giardini, it's also like a big big element like for the visibility of our like cause and all, like our piece, right? Because Ukrainian pavilion is hidden somewhere in Arsenal. It's not so big, and it's a shame, but it's also like not so many people are really going there like to check it, you know. And then you have also, which is a really good initiative, like of Pinchukar Center, that like for many years they're like trying, for the second year they were like trying to make these big shows with like big foreign names, but also Ukrainian like artists to again to raise the attention about the war. But it's like Ukrainian initiative, right? So then coming back to this importance of this like national pavilions, maybe sometimes it's like it's kind of like check and balances, you know, maybe they like those national pavilions could bring like some, or like could raise some questions or like some topics that maybe at some point in some years the main program would just ignore.
And also, I wanted to say that going back to the Polish pavilion, it's not, we are aware of these nationalities, that it's quite conservative approach of Venice Biennale. But in the same time, actually, the Polish pavilion doesn't represent foreign artists by the first time, because we already had, for example, Yael Bartana, that is this time in German pavilion. We had her pavilion. We were representing Sharon Lockhart, the American artist. 2 years ago, there was a Roma artist from Poland, Małgorzata Mirgatas. So this is not like exclusive situation for the Polish pavilion, which I'm quite proud of, that this is going this direction. This is showing actually the direction for other pavilions. And I hope it will become a role model, that national pavilion doesn't have to represent the artist that will be the nationality of the brand of the pavilion, right?
I actually just wanted to turn to that, to the Polish pavilion, because as we know, the pavilion, the curatorial choice for the pavilion changed after the Law and Justice Party lost power in 2023. So how do these political shifts in Poland, and I think in general, I'd say the political climate we're seeing across Europe at the moment, how do these shifts influence the arts in your view?
This is very important what's going on right now, because this shift made us not only to come back what was before, but also to rethink of this redistribution context of how do we nominate directors of the institutions, for example, because like 8 years ago, when the Law and Justice Party came, they were doing it, they were exchanging these directors very easily, sometimes just by the nomination of the Minister of Culture. And it was so easy to destroy the years of the history of the institution. And it did change a lot the artistic landscape in Poland. So right now, we are going back to, and we have this nomination of this new Minister of Culture, but in the same time, the people that are coming right now to these institutions, they just want to see what's going on inside. How did those institutions changed within these 8 years? And in the same time, they are preparing a proper competition to a new director that will be like a complex competition, that the person that will become a director will have experience, will have full competences to run this institution, because for 8 years we had several directors that didn't have any idea how to even make one exhibition. So in general, to rule the whole institutions, it was even worse, and it was really bad for the institution, for the people that were working in this institution, sometimes dozens, sometimes hundreds, you know. And also it was also very harmful for the artists. So right now we have to rethink how do we choose these directors? How do we rule with these institutions? And it's a good change, I believe. We are kind of a part of this change because we were also we got the second place in the competition for the pavilion. But people who were in the jury, except of 3 people that were independent curators, these were just friends of the commissar, who was the director of this institution, who was organizing the contest. And in the same time, he was the previous curator of the exhibition of the artist who actually won it. And the people who were in this commission were all of his friends. So, so we realized that, sometimes somehow we have to build the structure to avoid these kind of situations that there is only one person who will choose for everyone, and that the choice will be totally unfair,
I finally wanted to ask to end, what's next for both of you?
Right now, we are in Gdynia, in Poland, on a big festival that it's called Open Air. It's a music festival, but since years they had this session of museum or art in a festival, and they were cooperating with museums, inviting a lot of contemporary artists. And this year they invited us. We have our own big tent with presentation of one of the films that we are showing right now in Venice. So we are very happy because actually the goal of our work was to spread our manifesto as wide as we can. So we will have new public. There will be 100,000 people here, and we are very happy that that we will have the opportunity to show it to the new public.
And it's a karaoke piece
And
at
it's
the
a-
music festival.
Yeah, so it suits very well.
We are
and-
very excited of how like just general public will react.
But also, well, with this piece, actually, we will show this piece from Biennale in Zachęta, National Gallery of Art in Poland, in Warsaw, next year. This is a tradition that after Biennale, you show the same piece in Poland. We have several invitations that we are working on, and with Repeat After Me project, or Repeat After Me with other works of Open Group, because since 2015, like most or even all of the works of Open Group are focused on the war theme. So, it can be shown in the various combinations right now, and also like to show how it changed since 2015 till today, right? So yes, this is
Yeah, a lot of exciting things
Yeah.
in front of us. And yeah, Venice was also very helpful to bring people to to just introduce them to our practice. It was very like important.